Hey, what's up everybody? So today we have kind of an unusual topic. Today we're talking about breasts. Oh, what? Yeah, so you see there's been this huge controversy recently about should women be able to breastfeed in public, or should they have to go in the bathroom, or should they have to wait in the car, or something like that. And all sorts of people have chimed in on this, and people have done kind of undercover videos where they've had a woman breastfeed in public and tape people's reactions, and then compared that to a woman who's wearing like a very revealing dress. I just don't think that's appropriate. Yeah, so here's the thing. Christians believe that sexuality is a good and powerful and beautiful gift from God, but because it's so good and beautiful and powerful, it must be treated with great care and great respect. But unfortunately, through the years, and even today, in kind of a misguided effort to try to respect sexuality, it ends up getting treated as something that's bad or dirty or taboo. And lots of Christians consider it a forbidden thing that you should barely ever talk about. As it should be. Well, just hear me out. So my purpose here is not really to weigh in with real strict exact rules or suggestions about when women should or shouldn't breastfeed, but more to propose just some language and ideas that might help us to have this conversation a little more productively. A lot of the debate seems to come down to, are breasts something sexual? A lot of people say yes, breasts are sexual because they're super arousing and attractive, and they're something that men don't have, at least not really like in the same sort of way. And then there's people on the other end that say no, they're normal and natural and women shouldn't feel like they have to cover up or feel ashamed of their bodies, and after all, men have nipples. The purpose of breasts is for feeding babies, and that shouldn't be something that we have to cover up. So what I'm gonna say is that yes, absolutely I think breasts are sexual, but probably not quite in the way that you think I mean that. I'm gonna take a page here from the book The Holy Longing by a guy named Ronald Rolheiser, who has a whole chapter about sexuality, which I think is very excellent. And in this book, The Holy Longing, he makes a distinction between sexuality and genitality. He says that if you go back to the original root of the word sex, to be sexed means to be cut off, to be separated, to be two halves of a whole. And so sexuality is any part of us that finds something lacking within ourselves that we desire outside of ourselves. So anytime we reach beyond ourselves to try to find connection or intimacy, that's sexuality. Anytime we're drawn beyond ourselves to create something and be a part of something bigger than ourselves, that's sexuality. Now he says that genitality is a part of our sexuality, but it's certainly not all of it, and it's just one part relating very specifically to one physical aspect of our bodies. And when well integrated, genitality serves an important role in our sexuality, but it's not the entire whole. In our society, it tends to focus on the pleasure and the desires and the act itself. But Rolheiser says that if that's your only definition of sexuality, you're going to end up with a very immature, kind of stunted, selfish sexuality. He spends a while in this chapter giving examples of what mature sexuality in full bloom looks like, and I want to read a few of those to you. He says, when you see a young mother so beaming with delight at her own child, that for that moment all selfishness within her has given way to the sheer joy of seeing her child happy, you are seeing sexuality in its full, mature bloom. When you see a grandfather so proud of his grandson who has just received his diploma, that for that moment his spirit is only compassion, altruism, and joy, you are seeing sexuality in its mature bloom. When you see an artist, after long frustration, look with satisfaction on a work she has just completed, you are seeing sexuality in its mature bloom. When you see an elderly nun, who never having slept with a man, been married or given birth to a child, has through years of selfless service become a person whose very compassion gives her a mischievous smile, you are seeing sexuality in its mature bloom. When you see a community gathered around a grave making peace with tragedy and consoling each other so that life can go on, you are seeing sexuality in its mature bloom. When you see a table surrounded by a family laughing, arguing, and sharing life with each other, you are seeing sexuality in its mature bloom. When you see any person, man, woman, or child, who in a moment of service, affection, love, friendship, creativity, joy, or compassion is for that moment so caught up in what is beyond him or her that for an instant his or her separateness from others is overcome, you are seeing sexuality in its mature bloom. And when you see God having just created the earth or just seen Jesus baptized in the Jordan River, look down on what has happened and say, it is good, in this I take delight, you are seeing sexuality in its mature bloom. And I would add, when you see a mother cradling her child and nourishing and feeding that child literally from her own body, you are seeing sexuality in its mature bloom. Not a sexuality that has to do with genital pleasure or desire. Not a sexuality that has to do with anything you would take from someone else, but a sexuality that has to do with creativity, intimacy, and generosity. So how does that help us with the whole breastfeeding thing? Well, I think it gives us a much more holistic, much more healthy view of what sexuality is. And that not all things that are sexual need to be hidden away. Not all things that are sexual are dirty. Not all things that are sexual are bad or naughty. So I think the deeper question is, how can we think and act so that we as individuals and our culture as a whole can have a better integrated, holistic sexuality and not just a mere genitality? A sexuality that focuses not just on the desire we feel towards others or the pleasure we receive from others, but a sexuality that focuses on and helps us to understand our real need for intimacy and connection in healthy, holistic ways. And while I would definitely say that there are certainly sexual acts and sexual situations that are shameful and harmful, that doesn't mean that sexuality in of itself is shameful and harmful, or even that genitality in of itself is shameful or harmful. Quite the contrary. It's important to be careful with sex, not because sex is bad, but because sex is so good and so powerful. But with great power comes great responsibility. And I think we have a real responsibility as people, to ourselves and to the people around us, to see this powerful aspect of ourselves as more than just something we do with our body. Because it's only when we recognize the power, the truth, the goodness, and the beauty of sexuality that we can ever hope to achieve it in its full bloom, either in ourselves or in our culture. And in that way, I think the breastfeeding mother in public actually has something to teach us. That sexuality includes pleasure and includes desire, but that is only one aspect of it. Sexuality really is about relationship. It's really about intimacy. It's really about love. And not just a sentimental love of, oh, you make me feel happy, but a heroic, self-sacrificial, self-giving love. And I can't think of a better symbol of that holistic, mature, in full bloom sexuality than a woman feeding her child, than a mother literally giving herself to her offspring. So, are breasts sexual? Yeah, they are. Does that mean they're inherently dirty and breastfeeding mothers need to always be covered up and hidden away? I'm not so sure. But hopefully each one of us can recognize that our sexuality is about more than just what we desire. And it's about more than just what we do with our sexual organs. And it's about a lot more than the pleasure that we want or desire. And I hope and I pray that you and me can start to think about this deeper aspect of sexuality and start to cultivate within ourselves sexuality in its mature bloom. Maybe there's some hope for our culture too. Take care, and God bless.
Well, I appreciate what the boy is trying to do, Evelyn, but I think the whole conversation is just vulgar. Evelyn, I do not feel comfortable talking about this with you. Awkward turtle.